Good morning, everyone. As you can see, people are still straggling in. I can't imagine why. Heard that there were a number of nice parties last night. And all I can say is that after yesterday's 103-degree heat, it's a good thing we don't have to worry about climate change, huh? In any case, I wanted to welcome you to the final day of NACW 2022. And it's my privilege right now to introduce Linda Adams. All of us sort of take AB 32 here in California and the resulting cap and trade program as gospel. We sort of live and breathe it, but it wasn't always that case. And at a time when the state was wavering on what, if anything, to do about climate change, Linda, in her capacity as the Secretary of Cal EPA, was appointed as the lead negotiator to work with the recalcitrant parties. So we tend to think that it was inevitable. Well, it wasn't. It took someone the real knowledge of the players involved, a desire to drive to the main objective that the governor had at the time, which was establishment of a market-based system. Not surprisingly, there was a lot of pushback at that time. And Linda made sure it happened, made sure that the signature went on the bill. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce the chair of the Climate Action Reserve, Linda Adams.
Thank you, Craig, and good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's had a productive couple of days. And of course, this brutal heat wave reminds us that we have no time to waste. Before I introduce our speaker this morning, I want to just take a minute to thank the team at the Climate Action Reserve. Craig, Jennifer, the whole team has done really an amazing job putting this event together. And it's really great to see, and I'll get to see my many friends that I've worked with for decades and a lot of new faces at our event. So thank you, Craig, and the CAR staff. Thank you. Really a great event. So California's authority under the U.S. Clean Air Act opened the way for the state to be a leader in global warming policy. The California Air Resources Board arguably is the most influential air quality regulator in the world. No pressure, Liane. And a world-class organization such as the California Air Resources Board needs a world-class leader, and we are fortunate to have such a leader. Liane Randolph was appointed by Governor Newsom in December 2020 to chair the California Air Resources Board. She has served with distinction in a career in public service focused on energy and public policy. For 6 years recently, she was a commissioner at the California Public Utilities Commission. She served as general counsel to the California Natural Resources Agency, and she chaired the Fair Political Practices Commission. So stay out of trouble there. So those are just the highlights of Liane's distinguished public service. And the board is currently in the process of updating its AB 32 scoping plan to lay out a path to achieve carbon neutrality by mid-century. So we are very, very fortunate to have Liane Randolph here this morning. So Liane, thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here this morning. Thank you so much for having me. Always really excited to talk about the work we're doing at the Air Resources Board. And we have major decisions on climate and air quality that are coming this year and in the coming the next few years, and looking forward to talking to you about the work we're doing. These next few decades are absolutely critical in climate policy. We need to adopt policies that center equity, address community needs, and clean the air and address climate change. We need to move away from fossil fuels and away from combustion, and our policies are oriented in that direction. In California, our work serves as a model. We are proud that we serve as a model for other jurisdictions in addressing the pressing needs of climate change. Our programs serve as models because of the rigorous and careful scientific approach we take to developing the programs and our willingness to adjust the needs of the programs as a result of data and as a result of rigorous public engagement. As you know, over the decade and a half since we began implementing AB 32, we've updated our programs on a regular basis. And we are currently in the midst of our scoping plan update process, which AB 32 requires us to do every 5 years. And that will guide the next steps in our program. We're fully engaged with all stakeholders, with many of you here in this room. And we are including representatives of California communities that are already being hardest hit by pollution and will be equally impacted by the consequences of climate change. This year, for example, we are going to take the opportunity to begin an effort to update our forestry offset protocol. And the forestry protocol, as you know, provides multiple benefits. It delivers real reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in California and beyond. It brings benefits to our communities and environment, such as improved forest and watershed health, improved wildlife habitat, and additional cultural benefits for our tribal partners here in California and elsewhere. We will continue to ensure that the protocols take into account the impacts of climate change and that projects are consistent with the statutory requirements, that they provide the permanence and the additionality, and will address any other updates that are needed. And we will do that work once again, using the best and latest data and a full public process. And I invite you to participate in that process as you have in the past. As Linda mentioned, the scoping plan is California's climate action plan that describes cost-effective and technologically feasible paths to ensure that we meet our statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction goals, and provides the broad general guidelines for our programs. Our last scoping plan, adopted in 2017, laid out a path to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. And the 2022 scoping plan update will assess our progress towards that 2030 target, but also lay out a plan to achieve carbon neutrality by 2045 or sooner. An ambitious, but an absolutely necessary goal to meet the impacts of climate change. Getting to carbon neutrality is going to require both continuing to prioritize reducing greenhouse gas emissions from sources like transportation and industry, and sequestering carbon in sinks like our forests and our soils, and through technological direct air capture. In addition to laying the groundwork for new actions, the scoping plan will underscore the need to build on the successful programs that we have implemented for years. That includes the cap and trade program, as well as the low carbon fuel standard, and of course, regulations and incentives that support the transition to zero emission vehicles in all sectors, light duty, medium duty, and heavy duty vehicles. Our ZEV regulations and incentives have catalyzed the development of zero emission technology and accelerated its delivery into the market. California has more EV manufacturing jobs than any state in the United States. CARB is now building on this momentum with the next generation of clean vehicle regulations, which will set the course to meet the targets of Governor Newsom's zero emission executive order. Later this summer, we will be adopting Advanced Clean Cars 2, our latest light duty regulatory package. California is also making unprecedented investments in the infrastructure that is needed to support this transition to zero emission vehicles. The governor's budget last year and this year proposes a combined $10 billion to support infrastructure, vehicle incentives, and other programs to build that zero emission vehicle future and to prioritize equity in the delivery of those incentives. Programs that will bring vehicles to lower and middle income residents, and that will also prioritize smaller fleets in the medium and heavy duty space to ensure that small operators have the opportunity to make that transition to zero emission. Our low carbon fuel standard complements these efforts by ensuring a 20% reduction in the carbon intensity of California's transportation fuels by 2030 and beyond. And a strong LCFS drives innovation in lower carbon fuels. We've seen major announcements for new capacity build out of alternative fuel supplies like renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, along with continued investment in zero emission infrastructure. We have already displaced more than 16 billion gallons of fossil fuels with low carbon fuels. That's about how much gasoline all the cars and trucks in California use in a year. That's what we've displaced with low carbon fuels. And the revenue from credits traded in the program, which exceeded $4 billion in 2020, supports charging infrastructure, carbon capture, and sequestration projects associated with transportation fuels, and standalone direct air capture projects that pull carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. By increasing the market for alternative fuels like electricity and hydrogen, LCFS brings air pollution benefits to our most burdened communities, including reductions in toxic diesel pollution along our freight corridors. And as you all know, our economy-wide cap and trade program, which establishes a declining limit in greenhouse gas emissions throughout California, creates a powerful economic incentive for long-term, sustained, deep decarbonization. Our carbon market sends those long-term market and policy signals to industry with clearly defined caps that decline each year, self-implementing rules if allowance demand is too low or too high, and an annual increase in the auction floor. Together with our other programs, the Cap and Trade program helped California achieve its 2020 greenhouse gas emission reduction goal a full 4 years earlier than mandated. To allow us to achieve that 2030 target, reducing emissions by at least 40% below 1990 levels, in 2021, the program's cap started dropping 4% each year, which is double the rate from the last decade. As we continue to push for mitigation in our energy, industrial, and transportation sectors in order to achieve our climate goals, the Cap and Trade program will remain an important tool for reducing emissions from the covered sectors. And we continue to put billions of our Cap and Trade dollars to work through our California Climate Investments Program. The program invests cap and trade revenue to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, strengthen the economy, improve public health and the environment, particularly in communities burdened by historic inequities and disproportionately impacted by pollution and climate change. Since 2013, the legislature has appropriated $15.4 billion in California climate investment projects for projects statewide, including affordable housing, renewable energy, public transportation, zero emission vehicles, environmental restoration, sustainable agriculture, and recycling projects. Approximately $4.5 billion of all of those implemented investments, fully 1/2 of those investments have directly benefited our priority populations, including disadvantaged and low-income communities statewide. And the Biden administration has been looking towards our success as they are building their Justice 40 program to ensure that federal dollars benefit priority communities. So we're really proud to share our success with the federal administration. As we tackle the climate crisis, it is critical that we design climate policies to address those pollution burdens and increased health risks that those vulnerable communities face. During the scoping plan process, we are working closely with the Environmental Justice Advisory Committee to consider equity and environmental justice concerns, as well as engaging with all of our stakeholders through public workshops. And we're incorporating this input as we assess the various tools and strategies. Those communities have borne the brunt of the environmental fallout of our technological and industrial development, and they are among the communities that are most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, as we are already experiencing with wildfire in our rural communities, the air pollution impacts from wildfires, high heat days that are particularly challenging for low-income folks who have less access to air conditioning and other mitigation opportunities. And so as we work to clean up the energy and transportation sectors, we must take steps to ensure that we address those historic inequities and that we don't create new inequities with our new programs. So we are working carefully and thoughtfully to ensure equity in the work that we do. For example, our transportation funding plan that we adopted at the end of last year, as I mentioned earlier, directs more funds to lower and middle income residents and smaller operators. Our community air protection program continues to work with community residents, air districts, local governments, and businesses to develop emission reduction strategies that will protect those communities. CARB and California as a whole are committed to making sure that our climate policies not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but improve health and air quality for all Californians. As the nation and the world continue to look to California's leadership on climate, we want the example that we set to be one that addresses pollution burdens in those communities and centers equity. And close collaboration with communities and our partners are critical to shaping and implementing that strategy. To achieve our climate goals, we need to synchronize and integrate our efforts at all levels of government, from local jurisdictions to international partners. Those international collaborations are key to the success of our programs. For example, as you know, our cap and trade program has been linked with Quebec's program for the past 8 years, and we are grateful for Quebec's partnership in this work. In addition to intergovernmental partnerships, we also need to closely collaborate with communities, academia, the private sector, and other key stakeholders. We want to work together to send clear and consistent signals to the market. Our programs and policies need to catalyze investment, and those investments will support innovation and lead to emissions reductions that clean our air, mitigate climate change, and improve the health of our communities. These are challenging times. The recent IPCC reports are sobering, but they point out that if we take decisive action now, the worst impacts can be avoided. California has made sustained progress towards achieving our climate goals, and we continue to be committed to leading with equity as we continue to make progress and to work together to build the right solutions and the most creative solutions and the most effective solutions to address climate change. We have a lot of work to do. I know all of you recognize that. And I look forward to working with all of you as we build the scoping plan and as we implement it going forward in the coming years. Thank you.